punch lands. With enough force and a heavy enough weapon, even Carnotaur teeth can be knocked out. For a predator, losing any of your killing tools can be a disaster. Without teeth, you don't eat. The creature must recalculate. If I tried to show off and draw the warthog upside down mid-drop, it'd probably be embarrassing. Drawing upside down can be a helpful exercise to practice your observational drawing skills, but that wasn't my goal here, so I flipped him over to get a better handle on him. Drawing characters with gigantic muscles is fun. It forces you to think about how they overlap and press into each other. Okay, time for me to attempt to be transparent without also giving away too much too soon. The earlier videos in this episode, Hunting Ground, worked a lot better than the videos from the previous episode, Three-Horn Treachery. Showing a mix of design and narrative feels a lot better. Unfortunately, the most recent batch of episodes have shown that there can sometimes be gaps, where there's nothing new to design, and I have to focus entirely on just making the dang comic. I'm happy to show the progress, but I'm still trying to figure out how to talk about it. Instead, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the dinosaurs, specifically what I'm calling dragons. These are more than just apex predators. In the previous episode, I used the Baryonyx Walkeri, and this time I'm using a Carnotaurus. While I gave them different patterns, I made sure to give them a similar color palette: black, white, and red. If you've watched the design video about dragons, you likely already know why. As the story progresses, my plan is to differentiate between natural creatures, the typical animal predators you'd expect to find in the antediluvian world, and dragons, gigantic hybrids that are the result of nefarious intervention. The implication is that Nephilim are to humans as dragons are to dinosaurs. This process results in some telltale features they all share, including increased size, a shock of red, and a propensity towards high contrast patterns. This also gives me some narrative liberty to scale them up well beyond the biggest fossils we've yet discovered. The two we've seen so far are pouncing on what appears to be vulnerable prey, but I have a short episode in mind that will reveal how much more of a problem these things are capable of becoming. I particularly like how this panel turned out. Again, I'm very thankful that I made that head sculpture in 3D. While it wouldn't be the biggest challenge to draw, it just helps to keep that central landmark as consistent as possible. With that model, I could make sure to position the camera a little bit lower to convey that the dragon has lowered its head as it approaches the fallen warthog. You get to see these panels pretty quickly, but I spend a fair bit of time with each of them. I've been focused on this new character's entrance quite a bit, so it's nice to bring the shipwright back in. He already feels familiar, and this is just the first half of the second episode. One thing I thought about before opening up the development of this project was change. I've started telling the story, but I haven't locked in a particular technique. The approach I'm using right now is very similar to what I used when I made Tellurian, but that's not set in stone. As I was penciling these characters, I found I really liked the look of it. I'm thinking that I'll finish this episode off with the same linework style, but for the next one, I may try something a little bit looser. Think 1960s and 70s era Disney, like The Sword in the Stone or Robin Hood. I don't know if you can tell, but I really enjoyed drawing this forest. I had a fair bit of jungle in Tellurian as well. In some images, the plants were less important, but I always liked the result when I took my time with them. After arranging my first rough plant models into a dense composition, I used the render as my pencil layer. It's a chance to put on an episode of Creepcast and settle into the joy of inking. With all the colors blocked in, I could start to add some final details and highlights, then begin to visually separate the layers with value. Right from the thumbnail stage, I'm thinking about how I'm going to create depth with value. The humid atmosphere of this setting gives me a nice, dense haze that I can use to push things into the background. Then it's down to adjusting lighting and final color correction. As I've described it before, this stage is a lot like balancing stones. It's a push and pull between what seems to read the best. This is a panel I've been looking forward to drawing since I outlined Hunting Ground, the daring leap. Predator animals can often be avoided or evaded, but as I mentioned, as the story progresses, I'm looking forward to demonstrating why dragons are slayed on sight. I have to be patient though. There are 100 things I want to do right this second, but as much as I'd love that, that's not how any of this works. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed drawing this jungle as well, and there may be opportunities to reuse parts of it in future episodes. However, it impressed on me the potential value in creating 3D models that are of a high enough quality that I could use renders of them as final backgrounds, especially in contexts like this where they're really just adding texture. We'll see how that goes. One of the many things I'll be experimenting with as this project continues is pacing. For Dead Gods, I'm highly inspired by classic Sunday comics. The nature of that medium and their release schedule meant that every page had to be compelling on its own and move the story along. I really appreciate that swift pace because I enjoy the imaginative space between panels almost as much as I enjoy the panels themselves. My own story won't be released as Sunday comics, but I still like the idea of shorter, self-contained stories that are part of bigger narrative arcs. In some cases, I've already taken big leaps in time, and in others, like the last panel in this one, it's measured in milliseconds. It all depends on what I think the most relevant information is, but it's going to take some getting used to the difference between rushing and moving swiftly. And there we have it, 3 more panels. If everything else works out, next week I'll be wrapping up page 2. But wait, the video isn't done yet. Like I said earlier, these panels didn't require any extra design work. However, there are some scenes coming up that will require a ton of it, so I figured I'd spread that work across a few videos. This should save me some time later, and will also give you a mix of content for the next couple videos. I updated the character of the warthog from an old hunter softened by hard-won luxuries to an athletic hunter in his prime. By doing this, he now occupies a similar space as another of the hunting god's acolytes, the Sabertooth. It was hard to leave the warthog's old design behind, but maybe I don't have to. Not completely. I like the idea of the old expert, still dangerous, but wallowing a little too much in his own success. The Sabertooth may be a good candidate to pick up that mantle. I took the original design and drew what he might look like after a few too many victory feasts. He's been a valuable asset to the god of the hunt, but his role as high priest is slowly transforming him into an indoor cat. Here he's dressed for camp, with a few of his old saber-tooth trappings, but worn over a comfortable robe. He knows he's here for ceremonial reasons and isn't likely to be called into action anytime soon. I kept a lot of the original costume. I particularly liked the fanged mask and didn't see any reason to change it. His mane, hide mantle, and sleeves still work well. Again, because he's here to enjoy a spectacle and not to hunt himself, he swapped out his claw weapons for claw rings. Still dangerous, but not enough for a sacrificial kill. Now, I've still got a little bit of time, so I'm not saying this is his absolute final design, but it's something to stew on before he makes his first cameo appearance. Thanks for watching.